Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education University, and I'm your host, Tim Bogatz. This week's show is coming to you from San Francisco, California. I'm here to interview Paul Topolos, who will be our featured presenter at the Art Ed Now conference. Paul is an incredible animator who has worked for Lucasfilms on Star Wars movies and Star Wars video games, and then worked for Pixar, and he has had a part in almost every one of Pixar's feature films. You name it, like The Incredibles, Cars, Toy Story 3, Finding Nemo, Ratatouille, WALL-E, like the whole list. And I am excited for you to all hear from him here on the podcast, but even more so at the Art Ed Now conference in a couple weeks. Now, I'm also excited because Paul is one of the nicest people I've ever met. He was kind enough to let us do the interview in his home. And the best part is when we got here this morning, he was making this like gourmet meal for me and for our crew. And we've been lucky enough to interview a lot of famous people on the podcast, but I can definitely say that Paul is the first one to make breakfast for us. But I'm guessing you want to hear more about animation than you do about breakfast. So let me bring on Paul here so we can hear what he has to say. All right, Paul Topolos is here with me now. Paul, first of all, thank you for welcoming us into your home, me and the crew. And secondly, how are you?
I'm well. Superman does good. I do well. My mom was a teacher, so.
Very nice. Very nice. I guess I want to just first start by asking a little bit about you personally. Can you talk about, where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you ended up as an artist?
Right. So I grew up about an hour north of San Francisco. I was born in San Francisco, and we're filming right now in San Francisco. And it was Petaluma is a sort of a sleepy little, when I was growing up, it was a suburban neighborhood. The irony is George Lucas's, one of his first films, American Graffiti, was shot in Petaluma. Mm-hmm. And I remember my dad worked for Xerox. He was a repairman. And he remembers being at the Marin Civic Center where they were shooting George Lucas shot THX 1138. So I've got sort of George Lucas in my DNA growing up, because Star Wars for my generation was one of the biggest movies. So that's what really kind of got me interested in film, in art of film. My mom would buy me the art of books, and so of Star Wars. And so that's where I kind of learned that there were artists that worked in movies. I would have all the posters up in my room. But yeah, it was, if you saw the movie E.T., that was kind of the suburban landscape that I lived in.
All right, cool. Now, let's talk about that Star Wars thing, because I know you started out working at Lucasfilm doing some video games. That was kind of the springboard for your career. But can you talk about how you came to find yourself there, how you got started, and then, from there, the things you've done that kind of got you to where you are today?
Right. Well, so because my dad was he was a Xerox repairman, we always had paper around the house. And so me and my brother would draw. My mom was a teacher, and so she really kind of encouraged us to do that. My brother and I were we were terrible at sports. So one of the things that we could do was draw. And so that was always kind of in the back of my mind. In high school, I was even thinking about, I wanted to be a war correspondent photojournalist. And then I realized I was a complete coward. And I was even thinking about being a EMT. Yeah. my mom reminded me that I wasn't very good at biology. And my brother started being interested in graphic design and graphic arts. And that kind of got me interested interested in art again. And when I went to a junior college, I started experimenting with different art classes. And that was what kind of led me into, I like drawing people. And that was one thing I was kind of good at. And I just realized that all the art classes that I took, I really got into all these artistic endeavors. And that was, I didn't know what kind of a job I could find, even though my parents were very supportive. At a certain point, they were asking me, like, well, where is this going to lead? Can you find a job? And I remember even talking to an illustrator friend of mine, just saying, you know, one of my favorite teachers, I just loved his life. He would come in and teach life drawing. And I thought, well, that would be a good life. And my teacher was telling me that I was putting the cart before the horse, that you have to establish yourself as an artist, and then you might be able to get a job as a teacher. But still, back when I had just graduated, I didn't really know. I knew people that were working in illustration, in children's book illustration. I was kind of hoping that maybe I would do that. But it wasn't until I met a man that was working in film that it really kind of gelled all the things that I was interested in, because I was interested in film. I was interested in theater. I was interested in history and literature. And so that was what really made me see that there were people working in film. And that was something that I really wanted to do. And it was at that point that I really had to improve my artwork to be able to, attempt at trying to get jobs. And it was because I could draw fairly well people that I got my first job as a storyboard artist, which is, a storyboard is kind of like doing a comic book for the director. And so that led me into doing storyboards for video games. And then that led me into doing storyboards for film. And then that led me into doing matte paintings for film and concept design.
Out of all those jobs, when you're talking about storyboarding and matte boarding, concept design, do you have a particular one that you enjoy more than others, or is it all just kind of whatever comes your way, that's what you're going to be doing?
Yeah, that's what's sort of fun. Is it is fun to put on different hats to, different. I guess I always love the artistic feeling that you have where you just lose yourself in a painting. And that happens to me when I matte paint, because you are working on a painting maybe for a couple weeks, and you kind of get into this different zone. When I'm storyboarding, it's kind of stressful. You can't listen to anything I can't listen to anything with voices or lyrics, or I can't listen to a documentary. But I remember when I was boarding briefly on episode 1, I was so stressed out. The only thing I could listen to was Star Wars music. And that with storyboarding, you're thinking of it is kind of like constructing a sentence and telling a story in a sequential group of drawings, as opposed to a matte painting, which is usually an establishing shot and usually a big painting full of tiny little things. When you're doing texture painting, that's a whole different skill set, but still part of the same world, where you're trying to tell a story in a painting that gets put onto a piece of geometry. When you're concept painting, that's another thing where you're trying to tell a visual story, but each one is a little bit different, but they're all interconnected in that they're all trying to tell a story.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And, that kind of leads me into, you're just talking about this being stressful and, working on things repeatedly, I kind of wanted to ask you about, your working process and what it's like to be at Pixar. Like, when you're doing that, are you at the Pixar studios all the time? Are you working just 9 to 5, or are there a lot of like late nights and long hours involved?
Yeah. Well, luckily, Pixar has gotten, they try and be really organized as far as not trying to burn people out. Mm-hmm. On Incredibles, I did a lot of late nights. A lot of the movies I would work late. Sometimes just though on my own, just because you want to do a good job.
Right.
But I think for people when they're starting out, it's a little bit part of. For me, it was part of my process. I remember when I was in the video game industry, I really wanted to be in the film industry. I think partially because it's what you like to spend your time on. Mm-hmm. I had friends in the game industry who would go home and play games.
Right.
For me, I like to watch movies, and so the film industry was always where I was going towards. And so I remember some friends of mine from Lucasfilm were working on a film called Titan AE. Mm-hmm. And I knew that they were close by, and so I asked them if they needed any help. And the guy said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I've always wanted to matte paint. I've never been able to matte paint." So he said, "Paint a nebula, have it on my desk by tomorrow morning." So I stayed up all night and gave him a nebula, and he liked it. And so all of a sudden, I was in the movie business doing matte paintings. And but it was doing, I think on that show I did 4 all-nighters, not in a row, but that was just part of the dues that you had to do. I mean, when I was working as a matte painter for the previous group on episode 2, we would be working from 9 till usually 1 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of our graduate school. And that was what got me into Pixar, was the work that I did at Skywalker Ranch. So it is, luckily now I think people are trying to have a good work-life ratio. Mm-hmm. But I think if it's something that you really want to do in life, what I've realized in life is that there are a few moments where you do have to jump into the deep end of the pool. And that's usually when you do work that you never thought that you were capable of doing. Mm-hmm. So there are still times when you do the midnight oil and that you do extra work, and a lot of times it's for something that means something to you. I mean, especially I kind of forget sometimes that you're doing stuff that millions of people see and that people will see on the big screen, and you don't want to mess that up, and you don't want to disappoint people.
Yeah, for sure. And that can be pressure. But like you said, if it's something you're passionate about and something you care about, you're going to enjoy every minute of it. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a couple, I guess, behind the scenes questions. First of all, like, when you were working on a film, how long does that take from beginning to end? Like from when you're first receiving work, storyboarding, whatever the case may be, to like the actual film being published? How long does that take? And second part of that, are you ever working on multiple films at once, or is all your attention just focused on one thing at a time?
Right. Well, the Pixar films usually take probably about 4 years. And as a matte painter, I would only be on usually the last year. Mm-hmm. And so films are kind of broken into pre-production and production. So pre-production would be all the conceptual designs, all the storyboard work. Production would be the actual film that you see on screen.
Right.
So matte paintings are definitely things that you see up on screen. But when I do conceptual design, that would be stuff that would be early on in a film that you wouldn't see till till the art book comes out. But yeah, so yeah, usually it's 4 years.
Okay. And then, when you are doing that, like, is it fairly compartmentalized? Like, are you just working on what you see, or are you able to kind of see where the stories come from and where it's going when you're working on those things?
Because what's interesting is that you can, we'll see the films in storyboard form. So you know what the story is about, even though the story might be changing. But you have a sense of what each scene is about. And in terms of matte painting, that there would have been preparatory paintings done before. There would be color scripts that would sort of show you the emotional mood of each scene. So before I'd work on any matte painting, you would know, is this happy, sad, good, evil? And that's what I think is fascinating, is that you begin to think, what does evil look like? What does good look like? What does happy, what does sad look like? What colors is happy? What colors are sad? And that's what I think is fascinating, is the instinct, the human instinct that is inside of us, that you could see something and get a sense of understanding what the character is going through, and all these things are visual, and that's what I think is fascinating about just our process, is that you're showing the director visuals. You're not really verbally describing something. You are doing either a preparatory painting or a matte painting, presenting it to the director, and that they are looking at it and trying to see, does that feel like what this scene is about? Which is a very long-winded answer.
No, I think, it's interesting to hear about that, and people appreciate, hearing about the process and just kind of knowing what goes into the movies that they're watching. So they appreciate that. And I guess I just have one last question for you. You've worked on, it seems like, just about every Pixar film, but do you have, a favorite one that you've worked on, a collaboration that you've really enjoyed, or just maybe even a certain part of a movie that you're just really proud of being a part of?
Well, I think, even though it was a long time ago, Ratatouille, I really enjoyed working on all the Paris scenes, and Paris is a place that I love and that I've been to a lot, and just in the different shots of Paris, that was it was just a neat collaboration with technical artists. There was a guy named Alex Harville that I worked with very closely on all those shots, and working with the director, and like I had mentioned earlier, it was just fascinating to see. There were things that I didn't realize until after talking to the director after the film was done, just how the shots that I worked on were setting up different sequences in the film. And then even one of the last matte paintings that I did, which was a sunset shot of Paris, I didn't even realize just what a sunset means, just to have the director telling me that a sunset either is the ending of something or the beginning of something. And I really enjoy thinking about the emotional reasons behind something, that when you're doing a painting in a scene, I think people would, be happy to know just how much thought goes into every single shot, especially in a animated film like this, where everything has to be built and painted and designed. I think in a way that's what I loved about Star Wars, was it was a whole world that was created. If you think about Star Wars, every single thing had never been seen before and was designed, and somebody thought about it and somebody cared about it. And that's what I think is enjoyable about the work that we do, is that whenever we're working on a scene, there's a narrative, there's a story, there's a character, there's somebody wanting something, somebody trying to do something, something happening to that person in each one of these scenes. It's not just a sunny day for McQueen and Mater. It's, that there are story reasons behind every single thing that we do that I find fascinating. And so that each scene that you're working on, you're always trying to ask this question: how do I show this? That, and in a way, it's almost like an actor is always asking, who am I? Where am I going? Where have I been? And in the same way, an artist is thinking about that for whatever painting they're doing. So that's what I think is so interesting, is just this idea of story and what are you trying to say? I always think about a production designer that I love working with, Ralph Eggleston, who always is asking, what am I looking at? Mm-hmm. And I think even as students or teachers, you should be, when you make a piece of artwork, what am I looking at? What are you trying to say? What story are you trying to tell?
Yeah, I think that's some great advice and a great way to think about, all of our art making. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. So Paul, thank you so much. And we will look forward to hearing from you even more at the conference in a couple weeks.
Great. February 2nd.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
That is a lot of amazing information and quite a few great stories coming from Paul. I love hearing about all the different parts that go into films and all the different jobs he has done, from matte painting to storyboarding and concept design, modeling, everything that he talked about. And I think that is actually a great takeaway, a great thing that you can take back to your kids in your classroom as well. Animation and just work on movies in general is not as limited as we think. There's so many parts that keep things moving, so many things that need to be developed and created, so many skills that are in demand. It's a lot wider universe than a lot of us think. Hey, but if you want to hear even more from Paul, even more about his time in Hollywood, some behind the scenes ideas and some awesome stories, make sure that you are registered for the Art Ed Now conference. As we said, Paul is going to be our featured presenter there on February 2nd. You can hear a lot more from him. You can see some of the work he's created for all of these great movies, and even ask him your own questions during the Q&A session at the conference. So if you're not registered yet, make sure you do that soon at artednow.com. All right, so let's wrap it up. Thank you to Paul for the hospitality, for being a great interview, and thanks in advance for his wonderful presentation that'll be coming to you on February 2nd. I can't wait for you to see it. Art Ed Radio is produced by the Art of Education University with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. Thank you for listening. We will be back next week with Rachel Albert, another conference presenter, talking about her upcoming presentation and how to make the most of your experience at the Winter Conference. We'll talk to you next week.